Admiral Richard's hands trembled as he replayed the classified transmission for the third time. The secure command center's screens flickered with haunting images, his own fleet's ships systematically destroying what were supposed to be empty research outposts. But they weren't empty. The thermal signatures didn't lie. Thousands of civilian colonists, all sacrificed in the name of strategic necessity. 27 years of service. 2 decades leading humanity's most advanced space fleet. All built on carefully constructed lies. He zoomed in on the footage timestamp, March 27, 2184. 3 months ago. The same operation he'd authorized based on intelligence claiming the outposts harbored terrorist cells. The same mission that earned his crew commendations for safeguarding humanity's future. A message flashed across his neural implant: Admiral, the Council requests your presence. Operation Shadow Shield briefing in 10 minutes. Richard's throat tightened. In that room, they'd expect him to continue the charade. To nod along as they planned more strategic interventions. More civilian casualties masked as military necessity. He reached for the data crystal containing the transmission. One copy could expose everything. One crystal could tear down decades of systematic deception. But it would also destroy careers, shatter alliances, and potentially destabilize the very government he'd sworn to protect. The neural alert chimed again, 5 minutes to briefing, Admiral. Richard closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the data crystal in his palm. The faces of those colonists, believing until their last moments that their government would protect them, burned in his memory. His own face in the mirror each morning, believing he served a noble cause, now seemed like a stranger's. The next step he took would change everything. There would be no going back. Admiral, his aide called through the door, they're waiting. Richard slipped the data crystal into his uniform pocket. Sometimes, he realized, protecting humanity meant protecting it from its own protectors. As he strode toward the council chamber, each step echoed with purpose. The truth, no matter how devastating, would finally see light. The time for shadows and lies was over. Admiral Richard sat in his private quarters late into the night, the data crystal's contents spread across multiple secure screens. Each new document revealed deeper layers of deception. Operation Shadow Shield wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a pattern stretching back 15 years. His neural implant flashed with incoming messages from the Council, but he ignored them. The truth demanded his full attention. Casualty reports disguised as training accidents. Weapon test data masked as natural disasters. Resource allocation logs showing massive diversions to unauthorized projects. A knock at his door made him freeze. Enter, he commanded, quickly switching his screens to routine fleet reports. Lieutenant Chen, his most trusted aide for the past 5 years, stepped in. Admiral, forgive the late interruption. The Council is concerned about your early departure from the briefing. Richard studied Chen's face. In 15 years of command, he'd learned to read people. The slight tension around Chen's eyes spoke of more than simple message delivery. Tell me, Lieutenant, why did you join the fleet? Chen blinked, caught off guard. Sir? Your reason. The real one, not the recruitment statement. Chen's professional mask slipped slightly. My grandmother was a colonist on Horizon Station, sir. When it was destroyed by supposed rebels, I swore to prevent such attacks. Richard's chest tightened. Horizon Station. He pulled up the classified files. There it was, another strategic intervention masked as a terrorist attack. Sit down, Lieutenant. There's something you need to see. Over the next hour, Richard shared selected documents. He watched as Chen's expression shifted from confusion to horror to cold determination. How many others know, sir? So far? Just us. But that needs to change. Carefully. Strategically. Chen nodded, understanding the implications. We'll need proof that's impossible to dismiss. And allies we can trust completely. My thoughts exactly. Start with Commander Hayes in internal affairs. She's been asking uncomfortable questions about resource allocations. And Lieutenant Wang in communications, he lost family on the Palmer colony. They worked through the night, identifying potential allies, marking names of those who might be involved in the cover-up. Each decision could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. As dawn approached, Chen paused in his analysis. Sir, when this comes out, it won't just be careers ending. The entire system will be shaken. Richard looked at the fleet insignia on his uniform, remembering the day he'd first put it on. The system needs shaking, Lieutenant. We swore to protect humanity. It's time we honored that oath. The first rays of sunlight crept through his viewport, illuminating the scattered data screens. Somewhere out there, more innocent lives hung in the balance. But now, finally, someone was watching. Someone was ready to act. Prepare a secure channel to Commander Hayes, Richard ordered. It's time to build our network. The real battle for humanity's soul was about to begin. Commander Hayes stared at the evidence, her face illuminated by the secure terminal's glow. I knew something was wrong with the numbers, but this. She looked up at Admiral Richard. This is beyond what I imagined. Over the next 3 weeks, their small group grew carefully. Lieutenant Wang from Communications. Dr. Patel from Medical Research. Captain Reynolds from Strategic Operations. Each vetted personally, each carrying their own pieces of the puzzle. They met in shifting locations, maintenance tunnels, observatory decks during off hours, private quarters with scrambled surveillance. Every meeting revealed new connections. Dr. Patel had noticed inconsistencies in casualty reports. Captain Reynolds had questioned disappearing supply shipments. The weapon testing program is key, Hayes explained during one session. These energy signatures from the Palmer colony attack? They match experimental weaponry that officially doesn't exist. Richard nodded, remembering authorization requests he'd signed without questioning. We need more than data. We need witnesses. I might have something, Wang said quietly. A maintenance worker from Station 47 survived the accident last year. He's been in hiding, but I can make contact. Their network expanded like a web, each thread carefully tested for strength. They used old-school methods, handwritten notes, face-to-face meetings, coded messages hidden in routine reports. Technology could be traced. People could be trusted, if chosen wisely. But they weren't alone in their vigilance. Small changes appeared, unexpected transfers, delayed authorizations, subtle surveillance. The shadow they fought had eyes everywhere. They're watching, Reynolds warned during a late-night meeting. Lieutenant Chen's maintenance request was flagged for review yesterday. Standard procedure suddenly requiring Admiral-level clearance. Richard felt the net tightening. We need to accelerate our timeline. Wang, contact your witness. Hayes, prepare the documentation. Dr. Patel, those medical records need to be secured. Sir, Chen spoke up, what about the council meeting next week? All senior staff required to attend. Perfect timing, Richard smiled grimly. They think they're watching us. Time to let them see exactly what we want them to see. As they dispersed, Richard caught Hayes's arm. Commander, if this goes wrong. It won't, she cut him off. Too many good people have died for their secrets. We finish this. Walking back to his quarters, Richard passed young officers in the corridors. Fresh faces, bright with purpose and pride. Just like he'd been, believing in the system. Soon they'd learn the truth. The question was, would it break their faith, or forge it stronger? The witness from Station 47 was their next move. One more piece of evidence. One step closer to exposing everything. The shadow wouldn't go quietly. But they were ready for the fight. Alarms blared through Station 47's maintenance sector. Richard and Chen raced through dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing off metal walls. Behind them, security teams were closing in. The witness, a former maintenance worker named Thompson, trembled beside them. His testimony about the weapons testing would crack the whole case open, if they survived long enough to use it. Security bypass, Section 14B, Chen whispered, fingers flying over a control panel. The door slid open with a hiss. They'd almost reached their extraction point when Commander Hayes's voice crackled through their secure channel. "Admiral, they've locked down all primary exits." "They know." Richard's mind raced. Their careful planning, months of secrecy, all unraveling because one security officer had recognized Thompson during shift change. "Secondary route," Richard ordered. Through the reactor maintenance tunnels. The tunnels were a maze of pipes and conduits, steam hissing from joints, radiation warnings flashing on walls. Thompson stumbled, but Chen caught him. "Almost there," Richard encouraged. Their escape ship waited in a maintenance dock, hidden among supply vessels. A shot rang out. Energy pulse scorched the wall beside them. Security had caught up. "Keep going." Richard turned, drawing his sidearm. He fired twice, warning shots, giving his team time. They reached the maintenance dock. Hayes was waiting, ship's engines hot. But as they rushed toward it, blast doors began closing. "Override code Delta 79. Richard shouted into his neural link. The doors froze. 20 seconds to reach the ship. Security forces burst in behind them. "Admiral Richard. Stand down by order of the Council." 15 seconds. Chen and Thompson reached the ship's ramp. 10 seconds. Another energy pulse, closer this time. 5 seconds. Richard dove through the closing doors, rolling onto the ship's deck as Hayes punched the launch sequence. They blasted out into space, hiding among cargo traffic until they could jump to safety. Thompson sat shaking, but alive. His evidence was safe. "Sir," Chen reported, "they're broadcasting your arrest warrant. Charges of treason." Richard watched Station 47 shrink behind them. "Send the first data package to the independent news networks. Let them try to explain that." The shadow had shown its hand. Now the real war would begin. The proof lay scattered across Hayes's makeshift command center. Station blueprints, weapons test data, and Thompson's sworn testimony filled the screens. "The weapon signatures match perfectly," Hayes explained. "Each colony attack used prototype technology, tested without oversight or safety protocols." The evidence painted a damning picture. The Council had authorized illegal weapons development, using remote colonies as unwitting test subjects. Millions of credits diverted through shell companies. Hundreds of deaths covered up as accidents or rebel attacks. Thompson's hands shook as he identified faces in the security footage. These scientists, they knew. They watched the tests from the observation deck. Richard studied casualty lists from the Palmer colony. Names, ages, occupations, real people, not just numbers. A school teacher. A hydroponics specialist. A family of 4. Council meeting logs, Chen reported, decrypting another file. They discussed acceptable losses for Project Prometheus. Called it necessary sacrifice for humanity's defense. Dr. Patel burst in. "Admiral, emergency broadcast from Central Command. They're spinning the story, claiming we stole military secrets to sell to rival factions." "Perfect timing," Richard smiled grimly. "Hayes, prepare the data packets. Wong, get our media contacts ready. Time to show everyone what real treason looks like." They worked through the night, organizing evidence, preparing broadcasts. Each piece had to be undeniable, the narrative clear enough for the public to understand. Thompson watched the activity around him. Will people believe it? After all these years of trusting the council? Truth has its own power, Richard answered. Once seen, it can't be unseen. The shadow had grown strong in darkness. But its time in the light was coming. The council chamber fell silent as Richard strode in, flanked by Hayes and Chen. 12 council members sat in their elevated seats, faces tight with controlled anger. Admiral Richard, High Counselor Bennett spoke first, "You've betrayed everything we stand for." "No," Richard's voice carried through the chamber. "I'm honoring what we stand for." He activated the central display, filling the room with evidence. Colony footage. Weapon tests. Financial trails. "You dare." Counselor Zhang started. "We all dare," Hayes stepped forward, transmitting data packets. "Every news network is receiving this evidence now. No more shadows." Security teams moved in, but stopped as Thompson's testimony played. Images of dead colonists. Children's toys floating in space debris. "You killed innocent people," Richard continued. "Used them as test subjects. All for weapons that violated every treaty we've signed." "We did what was necessary," Bennett stood. "For humanity's protection." "Protection?" Chen's voice cracked with emotion. "My grandmother died on Horizon Station. Your protection killed her." The chamber doors burst open. Military police swarmed in, but not alone. Independent journalists. Colony representatives. Opposition leaders. "It's over," Richard declared. "The truth is out." Bennett's face hardened. "You've doomed us all. Without these weapons. Without truth, we're already doomed," Richard cut him off. "Humanity deserves better than lies." The arrests began. Some council members surrendered quietly. Others raged, threatened, promised retribution. But the evidence was undeniable. The Shadow's reign was ending. But the real work of rebuilding trust was just beginning. The truth rocked the fleet and colonies. Public outrage exploded as evidence spread across networks. Protests filled streets on Earth and major colonies. "No more shadows" became their rallying cry. Richard watched from the reformed command center as investigations deepened. More officials arrested. Hidden facilities discovered. Survivors coming forward with stories. "Public approval of the military is at historic lows," Hayes reported. "They're calling for complete restructuring." "Let them," Richard replied. "Trust needs rebuilding from the ground up." Recovery teams found more test sites. Dr. Patel led medical aid to affected colonies. Chen established new transparency protocols. But opposition grew. Former council loyalists spread disinformation. Called them traitors. Claimed the evidence was fake. "They're organizing," Wong warned. "Building support among those who prefer the old system." Richard understood the fear. Change threatened power structures, comfortable lies. Yet more people joined their cause daily. Truth's momentum was unstoppable. New colony representatives joined Fleet Command. Civilian oversight committees formed. Every operation now required multiple approval layers. "It's slower," Hayes admitted. "But necessary." "Speed isn't worth the cost of secrets," Richard responded. The Shadow's power was breaking. But its echoes would test their resolve in ways they hadn't imagined. The assassination attempt came at dawn. Richard dodged the energy blast, diving behind a terminal as security responded. The attacker, a former council operative, was quickly subdued. More resistance emerged. Supply lines sabotaged. Communication networks hacked. Loyal officers threatened. They're calling themselves Defenders of Order, Hayes reported. Former council members funding them secretly. Richard refused to revert to old methods despite pressure. Transparency remained their shield. Every threat documented, every response measured. Thompson organized survivor groups, their testimonies strengthening public support. Dr. Patel's medical evidence countered propaganda. Chen's new security protocols caught infiltrators. They want us to respond with force, Richard told his team. To become what we fought against. Instead, they built alliances. Colony leaders. Earth governments. Reform-minded military officers. Each connection strengthened their foundation. The defenders faltered against united opposition. Their secrets exposed, funding traced, supporters dwindling. Victory came not through force, but persistence. Truth proved stronger than shadows. But the final battle still awaited. The shadow's deepest roots needed facing. Admiral Zoltan stared at the wall display, a mixture of despair and resolve etched on his face. The new weapon that had obliterated the colony couldn't be allowed to fall into enemy hands. He turned to face his senior officers. "We have no choice," Zoltan said gravely. "We must destroy the research facility and all records of this cursed project. No one can ever know what happened here." Captain Vela spoke up hesitantly. "But sir, what about the scientists and their families stationed there? We can't just dash." They knew the risks. Zoltan snapped. "We all swore an oath to protect humanity, no matter the cost. This is the only way." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Tactical, prepare a spread of antimatter torpedoes. Target the research station and the surrounding 100 kilometers. Leave nothing behind." The bridge fell silent, the weight of the order sinking in. Finally, the tactical officer responded. "Torpedoes armed and ready, Admiral." "On your command." Zoltan closed his eyes for a long moment. Then, almost inaudibly, "Fire." The view screen lit up as a dozen antimatter warheads streaked towards the planet's surface. They watched in silence as the research station, and everything around it, vanished in blooms of searing white light. When it was over, Zoltan sagged into his chair, looking far older than his years. "Let this be a reminder," he said hoarsely, "of the lengths we must sometimes go to protect our species. Of the burden we bear as its sworn defenders." He turned to his somber officers. "Purge the records. Swear the crews to secrecy. As far as the fleet is concerned, this mission never happened. Humanity must never know how close we came to wielding damnation in the name of salvation." As he gazed out at the scorched planet, Zoltan couldn't help but wonder if, in trying to save humanity from the horrors of war, he had forsaken some vital part of their own humanity. Only time would tell if the ends could truly justify such terrible means. The debris slowly cooled in the void as the fleet made the long, heavy voyage home, its secret buried beneath the ashes of the fallen. The wages of war had been paid in full, and the currency was the soul of a species. Mankind would fight on, but none could say if its moral compass would survive the scourging crucible of desperation and sacrifice. In the end, perhaps victory and damnation were simply two sides of the same blood-soaked coin.